Hi, I'm Barry McGough. I do corporate innovation and corporate applied innovation specifically. Today I'm going to talk to you about everyone's favorite subject, AI, and not that it's not overhyped, because of course a lot of people feel that it is, but I want to bring some reality to how we're applying AI with our workforce, especially in specific industries, and really bring it to life with some real examples of how people are using it practically in day-to-day life. So last year, we had a really good time in 2023. We started thinking about these funny memes and really having our minds blown with images that could be created with AI. So on the left, you see this meme that we all were thrilled by, which was the Pope in a puffy Balenciaga jacket. We thought it was amazing, really, really funny. And we thought, wow, this is the end of truth as we know it. We can make up anything we want. And this blew us away. 2 years later, this is what the Pope can do. Amazing, right? So if we're going to put this into context, let's ground AI and its practical application in reality. So Jamie Dimon just recently said that AI could be as transformative as electricity or the internet. That could be very hyperbolic, but it could also be true. If we're looking at how people are forecasting AI in the business world and its impact, I really like what PwC did, and they presented this at the National Retail Federation in January, where they talked about innovation being at a tipping point. If you think about innovation and AI innovation in terms of exponential growth, you can see that there are several factors that are causing this growth. There are more breakthroughs in the last 3 years than in the last 70. So you can look at things like the speed of innovation, our ability to use 6 times the power of compute to be able to enable near unhuman predictive capabilities. We can look at the maturity of technology, and now we can look at compute power, which is 60 billion teraflops per US dollar. So the cost of data is coming down, and yet the urgency of adoption is rising. So if you look at some of the facts that we can pull out of this, Gen AI hit 60% household adoption in 2023, and we are slightly lagging in corporate adoption, but I'll show you a little bit more about that. Goldman Sachs has quoted that generative AI will increase global GDP about 7% in the next 10 years. That's about $7 trillion in increase in global GDP. The investment of AI could peak at about 2.5 to 4% GDP. So that's $75 billion to $1.2 trillion. That is so large that it's roughly the GDP of Saudi Arabia. They also talked about how many years it's going to take for AI adoption to actually come and we can actually see it and realize it. The realization of this, they're anticipating, might not come till the second half of this decade. But the second half of this decade started in January. We're also thinking about the impact of AI, and the impact could be about 15% increase in US labor productivity. An increase in labor productivity has implications to the workers, which we're going to talk about today. If you look at the number of companies that have adopted AI, you can start to see that large companies are really, really bringing it on board, with the US topping over 80% adoption of use of AI in looking at machine learning, computer vision, and natural language processing as part of their business functions. You can also see that large organizations are starting to adopt it at a much higher clip than smaller organizations. So you see a trailing indicator here, where you can see the large companies actually starting to adopt it at much greater rates. We're also looking at the other implications of AI. So if you think about what happened at the World Economic Forum, they put out a risk assessment forecast where they ask major companies to say, where do you see the risk in the next 2 years and the next 10 years? In the next 2 years, leaders put forward that they thought that misinformation and disinformation were the number one risks of AI. If you put that out to 10 years, that risk for misinformation and disinformation, people's concerns about this at the corporate level are dropping down to 6th and 7th places, right? And the number one thing that people are worried about is not AI, they're worrying about things like extreme weather events. So we're starting to think about how AI is going to impact us, but we know that there's going to be long-term implications of AI in society. McKinsey talked about how consumer insights and organizations will start to use Gen AI. And we can see that in our sector, in consumer goods and retail, the number one use case is marketing and retail, with the number two use case being product and service and product development and services. What's also interesting is how we're using it as society. So I really like what Harvard Business Review does generally. You can think about what they're doing with their AI use cases. So when we're talking about Gen AI use cases from last year to this year, the number one use case last year that people were talking about was content creation and editing. There was also a lot of work being put into AI with technical research assistance, troubleshooting, and coding specifically. What's interesting is that 2025, the number one use case in society is therapy and companionship. So we're starting to trust AI as our friend and our therapist far more. And that jumped from number 3 to number 1 at 31%. What's also interesting, if you look at this, and this is a little bit more on the humorous side, if you look at the deeper dive of the top 100 Gen AI use cases, if you look down at number 63, one of the use cases is disputing a fine. Some of the other use cases are how can I use AI to break the rules, which is something that's still in the top 100. And also, sadly, if you like to work out, planning workouts is at the bottom at number 100. So, but all that aside, it's very interesting to see how we're starting to use AI in society. But you can also see that the organizations using AI has rapidly increased over the last year. And you can see a powerful change of the use, not just AI, but the use of Gen AI in the office and in businesses from 23 to 24 with a huge spike off to the right. This is data from March 25, so this is just a few weeks ago. Again, grounding ourselves in the reality of how companies and businesses are using AI, you can see that the number one use case that people are starting to use is supply chain and inventory management. Because companies and CEOs are looking to figure out ways AI can reduce costs and reduce OpEx. So we can see that also HR and IT are starting to spike in their use case at 50% and 42% of companies reporting that they're starting to use AI there. And what they're looking at is between 34 and 50% reporting operating expenses savings between 10% and 20% of the top line. Now, when we talk about worker productivity, this is really, really important because we do have to think about what the goals are with AI in business. PwC, again, does a fantastic job looking and forecasting, and you can see from this chart, which is an eye chart, but really important that they can see a real impact of AI from end to end. From the beginning of product creation through strategy, through process, through finance, inventory control, merchandising, and sales. There's a place for AI in every single thing as we think about every aspect of our business, as we think about this as an end-to-end solution all the way through. You'll hear me talk a little bit in this presentation today about Amy Webb and her Future Today strategy group. Amy Webb is a 20-year speaker and veteran at South by Southwest. That is a venue that I find really, really important. I call it Davos, or World Economic Forum for the rest of us, as we get to go to Austin and we get to learn about what people are talking about what is the direction of travel in society, in technology, in the creator community, in policy. And what she put forward in this March at South by Southwest is that these are, if you can look at this chart, this is every single technology that you can think of, from living intelligence to AI to quantum to space technology. And what's really interesting is she's forecasting when it will hit each industry at what time over the next 10 years, and whether it has high relevance or low relevance. What's interesting about this chart is there are very, very few gray boxes in here that say that AI is of low relevance. What I put into this chart here is everything that you see in white as today. These are things which will affect the retail industry and the CPG industry today, or when we say soon, we say in the next 1 to 3 years, which is really, really interesting because if you know from our corporate calendars, we're all planning product to be launched in spring 26 and fall 26. So we're already planning it 18 months advance today. So you can see that every aspect of AI, advanced sensors, computing manufacturing, AR, VR, XR, climate green tech, and even robotics will be working their way into our industry now, and we need to be prepared for it. What's also interesting when we talk about jobs is we think about where the spikes are in terms of where AI is being put in job descriptions. This is a really interesting graph by country of how often AI, or natural language processing neural networks, or other terminology, is put into requests for jobs and job queries. You see a spike in 2020 when GPT-3 came out, and all of a sudden AI and job descriptions started spiking up. Then it flatlined, and then in 2022, when ChatGPT came out, you can also see that we have more spikes in the need and the request for AI to be put into job descriptions. So it is a skill that's going to be very, very important that we all understand how to learn and leverage. Last year, Harvard Business Review did a very interesting study around what 570 experts predicted would be the impact of AI on jobs. And what's interesting is they predicted the impact of AI on everything. Very harrowing and a great report, but what they talked about is a kind of a timeline over the next 10 years. By 2026, they say that job tasks are going to be partially automated, so we're starting to see that. By 2029, they said that new technologies will create new types of occupations and totally new industries. We can envision that. By 2030, more and more occupations are augmented by AI, helping people work more efficiently, and by 2037, which I would argue will happen a lot sooner than that, people will work alongside robot colleagues. More and more jobs are entirely replaced by technology. What you see on the left here is figure 1. Figure 1 is the robot that's being assembled with ChatGPT and Jeff Bezos to be able to have humanoid robots be automated and work alongside of you. So this is today. This is not 11 years from now, this is today. So we can see that what they're talking about is right. And the impact of jobs, we can also, this just came out in April. Toby Lutke, and this was very famous, infamous even, that he talked about the fact that he would accept no more job recs unless managers could prove that they couldn't fill that job with AI first. That sent a chill down the spine of people looking for jobs, but on the other hand, other CEOs said, yes, I think that's a great idea. So what we're really starting to worry about now is whether AI has the ability to affect entry-level jobs. Anish Raman, the Chief Economic Opportunity Officer at LinkedIn, actually sounded the alarm with the New York Times last week and said, we are starting to see a disruption like we haven't seen since the 80s. So this is a real watch out for young kids moving out of college and going into the workforce, which is, to us, a clarion call for the need to upskill. Upskilling is going to be very, very important as we understand that AI is a tool, and it's an important tool to do our jobs. A lot of people like to talk about the fact that AI isn't going to take your job. The person that knows how to use AI is going to take your job, and I think that's never been more true. But we are going to have a watch out for the next generation. McKinsey also reported recently that, and this is the good news part of this, that corporations are starting to understand that they need to use this as a tool and that they're investing in upskilling. So you can see that in the last few years, about 11% of employees are starting to be reskilled. And in the next 3 years, corporations are planning reskilling up to the tune of about 28%. So we know the corporations are taking this seriously, and they're planning to upskill people in AI now, which is great news.